In St. Petersburg, there is one of the largest art and cultural historical museums in the world, the Hermitage. There, hundreds of exhibits from the 18th century are kept. These are masterpieces of micromechanics and engineering thought of that time. To develop such mechanisms today, you need teams of designers, computers, and manufacturing capabilities. In Europe, the fascination with this kind of automation and mechanical toys lasted for 200 years according to history, and almost suddenly the interest in them disappeared. By the turn of the century, about 5,000 similar exhibits had accumulated in the palace of the Chinese emperor. So how many of them were there in all of Europe? Probably no fewer than we have cell phones now. So what happened that both the tradition of making these automata, known as robots, disappeared, and the interest in them vanished as well. Historians say that the invention of the gramophone put an end to such toys, but is that really the case? There could be a completely different reason, considering the continuous advancements in smartphone electronics in our time. It's very doubtful that just like that, all of a sudden, interest in them could instantly disappear all over the world. One of the masterpieces kept in the Hermitage collection is the Kulibin clock, an egg-shaped clock created by Kulibin in 1767 for the arrival of Yekaterina. The clock played Easter melodies every hour. At the end of each hour, miniature figurines performed scenes based on biblical themes. The clock consists of 427 tiny parts. Yes, restorers still cannot restore them because they cannot figure out the secret of how they work. After reading this brief information, think about how a simple self-taught person could create such a masterpiece in micromechanics. A modern engineer needs to know many disciplines and have simply enormous experience in material science and the principles of constructing clock mechanisms. The presence of an excellent school in the remote areas of the Russian Empire suggests he may have traveled and studied abroad in Europe, far from the more undeveloped parts of Russia at the time. Clocks from the 17th and 18th centuries. How was it possible to make such precisely symmetrical gears and other parts by hand? Once, using a silver plate and a marked template, I made myself a little medallion. I had a hand jigsaw, a file, some needle files, and polishing paste at my disposal. But I still couldn't achieve a high-quality result. I didn't manage to get good geometry or quality metal work. Well, of course, I'm not a jeweler and I don't possess all their techniques, but were all watchmakers of that time really such jewelers? Turning a miniature gear isn't the same as setting a stone into a ring. If you examine Kulibin's clocks and other clocks made by European masters of that time more closely, you can see that the parts were made using a lathe, not by hand. Alright, so what do we actually know about the lathes from that time? It turns out there was a great variety of them. And here is the information. Illustrations from a 17th century book. These are gun-making machines for producing rifle barrels at the Tula factory. Their quality is in no way inferior to 19th century machines. It was precisely on these machines that such masterpieces were made, not with hand tools as historians now write. Here are a few more photos of the machines on which high-tech parts were manufactured, 17th, 18th centuries. Here is an ad on Avito for the sale of a machine bed from the early 19th century. Apparently, there is no date on it. And what are these machines for making clocks? But the machines themselves were also made on machines, probably using milling principles for metalworking. The components of these machines are also works of art. And at the peak of engineering thought and technology of that era, and this was everywhere. That is, with these examples, we can show that not everything was produced by hand, as the official history tells us. Hand processing with such precision for clock mechanisms won't give you a working clock, they simply won't work. Another interesting aspect is the friction nodes in such mechanisms and the lubricants used. And there are many such questions, but no one gives answers to them from the point of view of manufacturing technology and material science. And here is a real masterpiece of art, the peacock clock. They were made in 1770 in England, intended as a gift for the Chinese emperor, but were given to Prince Potyomkin as a present for Yekaterina. The clock was delivered disassembled and some parts were lost along the way. They were restored and repaired again by Kulibin, who was already serving as a mechanic at the Academy of Sciences. These clocks are still in working condition. They are wound once a week to maintain their operability. Every 15 minutes music plays and the figures of three birds come to life. The elements of the mechanism are made of silver and gilded copper. On the left are clocks from Germany around 1550, on the right are clocks from the 16th century British Museum. Here we can see that there was a high level of engineering thought at that time. Before making it, it was necessary to calculate the gear ratio of the mechanism so that it would precisely move the hands in accordance with the length of a day. And for that, it was necessary to use astronomical observations or to rely on the records of other previously made clocks. But these are just table clocks. By the late 1500s, miniature clocks also existed, as seen in these examples. One can endlessly admire the engineers of that time, or as they are simply called, clockmakers. Here we see the modern process of assembling Swiss mechanical watches. Before assembly, all these parts need to be manufactured with the highest precision. Now all calculations are done in software, and the parts are manufactured on computer numerical control machines. But how was this done before? Here we see the modern manufacturing of gears for large clocks on lathes. Most likely, in the past, all of this looked absolutely the same. The plates for the gears had to be cut evenly with precision accuracy. On the right is the Jaquet-Droz machine from 1780, used to create symmetrical multi-petal parts. On the left is a lathe from London, dated 1838. It was probably on machines like these, using this principle of operation, that gears for clocks were made, but definitely not by hand. It can be said with confidence that various machines existed not only at the beginning of the 19th or 18th centuries, but much earlier as well. This is also evidenced by such items as barrel organs, musical boxes, clocks, medieval robots, and automaton dolls. The engineering thought in them is at the highest level. For modern handicraft production, it is unattainable. A masterpiece of engineering thought and the musical abilities of craftsmen of the 18th and 19th centuries are these barrel organs and musical boxes. It's hard to imagine now that any craftsman could combine his talents in something like this. Maybe those craftsmen also had their own music. Music was composed for such devices, but this is 18th century automation and just the beginning. Let's take a look at the androids of that time, which could write and play musical instruments. The official information about this robot doll states it was made in 1770 by the Swiss watchmaker Pierre Jaquet-Droz. This automaton is capable of writing sentences up to 40 characters long with a quill pen, such as "I love you my city" or "Pierre Jaquet-Droz, my inventor." The creator named it calligrapher. The height of the robot doll corresponds to that of a 5-year-old child. The construction consists of 6,000 parts, the body is made of wood, and the head is made of porcelain. The doll doesn't just write a sentence, it also dips a goose feather into the inkwell, shakes it off, turns its head to watch the process, and even follows it with its eyes. Pierre Jaquet-Droz crafted the doll in 2 years. The creator and engineer also made clocks with singing birds and fountains. But he also has 2 more feats of engineering: the dolls, the draftsman, and the musician. The musician consists of 2,500 parts. She sat at a small but real harpsichord and played music by pressing the keys. She could perform 5 compositions. The doll even breathed and also moved her eyes. This doll can draw a portrait of Ludovic and an image of his dog Tutu. All 3 dolls are located in the Museum of Art and History of Neufchâtel and still work to this day. And these are just a few of the creations that have reached us, showcasing the unique engineering skills of the craftsmen of that time. So, who were these Kulibin, Master, Levcha, Pierre, Jaquet-Droz and other brilliant engineers of that time? We know that in all regions there are architects to whom all ancient structures are attributed, even though they are of the same type and require highly developed centralized production technologies and standardization. From this we can conclude that in the Middle Ages, Kulibin, Pierre, Jaquet-Droz and others were used to designate a certain field engaged in micromechanics, which clearly demonstrates to us the level of development of civilization in those centuries. And this does not mean that before that civilization was less developed. Again, numerous facts do not give us any reason to think so. Subtitles created by